Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
Welcome to UFOs Above Canada, a nighttime podcast series exploring the people, the events, and the concepts that surround the Canadian UFO experience.
Welcome back to UFOs Above Canada. In tonight's episode, I'm going to be joined by UFO writer and researcher Chris Rutkowski for a discussion surrounding one of Canada's many UFO secrets. But this isn't one of those secrets that anyone's trying to keep. It's actually quite the opposite. I'm sure the town of St. Paul, Alberta would love to have the world know about their unique contribution to Canada's UFO story. Many Canadians may be unaware that back in 1967, the mayor of St. Paul, Alberta decided to have the world's first UFO landing pad built. And the monolithic concrete structure still stands there today, waiting for its first arrival. So let's get to it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, Chris Rutkowski and I will discuss the fascinating story of St. Paul, Alberta's UFO landing pad.
Are we alone? Or is there life out there? For the town of St. Paul, Alberta, there was never any debate. Why else would they construct the world's first UFO landing pad? The flat, round structure, complete with a welcome sign, was deemed visitor ready on June 3, 1967, as part of Canada's 100th birthday celebrations. National Minister of Defense Paul Hellyer flew in to cut the ribbon. Since then, it's been visited by Queen Elizabeth in 1978, Mother Teresa in 1982, and thousands of tourists. But not aliens that we know of.
Chris Rutkowski, how are you doing tonight?
Very well, Jordan.
I should say this has been a very tough interview to schedule. I don't know if there's anyone who travels the country as much as you do. What have you been doing over the last few weeks, and why have you been so hard to track down?
Yeah, it's been busy. I've been I was off in Calgary filming a show for APTN. I was just off on a tour with Atlas Obscura, looking at paranormal locations and UFO hotspots. It's been busy. It has been busy, and the summer's just starting too. So.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, you have a book that was just released. Last time you were on the show, you were talking about the release of the book. But what's happened? How's it doing?
I'm not sure how it's doing so far, but I've had a lot of positive response. I've had emails from people. There's been one review so far, and that was very positive.
Good.
And looking forward to more. We're hoping to have some sort of release signing party. I don't know, something coming up in July, but I don't know about that yet. But something's going to come up. Well,
that's cool. And you're probably already hard at work on your new book.
I've already got a few things working. Yeah, absolutely.
And before we get into our topic tonight, you mentioned like you've been busy the last few weeks. Summer's just starting. Now that the pandemic is kind of allowing people to gather in large groups, do you have any big events or anything over the summer UFO wise that you're looking forward to? UFO festivals, conventions?
UFO festivals. Well, I can tell you that a festival I did not go to, which was the Scientific Congress on Ufology, the big one down in at Alabama, that a lot of people had gone to. I'm part of the SCU, and I heard that about a dozen people came back from that with COVID. So
oh, man.
I'm actually glad that I didn't go.
Yeah. Okay.
It's even though things are opening up, I've heard things are still a problem out there. So in a way, it's good that we're still kind of cloistered, but I know that June the 24th and 25th in Brazil is the Brazilian Scientific UFO Conference. Oh. And I gave a presentation or recorded a presentation for that. And I think it's going to be available on their website eventually. A lot of people, it's truly international. I'm the only Canadian.
That's pretty cool. One bit of Canadian UFO news. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this. Is I read that Roswell, New Mexico, they're building like a UFO themed Walk of Fame, and I think one of the first people that will be commemorated in this UFO Walk of Fame is a Canadian. Well, I guess a half Canadian. It's Stanton Friedman.
Right.
That's a good connection between Canada and a major, UFO, at least UFO place. I don't know if it's today. I don't know how discussed Roswell is in the great scheme of things. It seems like kind of the UFO discussion has long moved past Roswell, but it's cool to see, especially here on the east coast of Canada where I am, to think that, someone from this part of the world is being commemorated in that way.
Absolutely. And, Stan was a big part of the Roswell discussion. And so it's quite interesting that, the first person, among the first persons to be commemorated in that regard is a Canadian. In fact, going back to the Brazilian thing, that's actually the topic of my presentation to Brazil, is the influence of Canada on ufology.
Oh, really?
And I mentioned Stan quite a bit, as a matter of fact.
That's cool.
So it is true. There's Canada has actually been really at the leading edge of ufology all along, and we sort of get downplayed a little bit, but a lot of Canadian individuals and groups and so forth have been really doing some remarkable things all the way through ufology.
Speaking of Canada's contribution to the UFO scene and maybe Canada's acceptance of it, that kind of brings us to what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. Is I had heard several times the stories of there being a UFO landing pad in Alberta. I never really dug into what it is, why it's there, how it was built, who built it, and I guess I also didn't realize like how official it is, as it was something that the town built. I just assumed it was something some wild person built in a field somewhere or something. Have you spent a lot of time reading or considering the UFO landing pad in St. Paul, Alberta?
Well, I'm not sure if I spent a lot of time. I've been out there a couple of times.
Did you stand on it?
I have stood on it. Okay. Yeah. The story is that back in 1967, as a centennial project, a lot of places across Canada wanted to do something unique or something special. And because there were a lot of UFOs that were in the news in 1967, there had been a couple of people in the small town of St. Paul who said, let's do something about UFOs. Maybe construct something different. And they came up with this idea of a landing pad. And they got municipal funds. There's another case where, technically government funds went towards it. And this flat pad was built. And there were flags put on it and so forth. And no less an individual than Paul Hellyer himself, who was at the time Minister of Defense, opened the pad, cut the ribbon, and said a few words. And then over the years, it kind of fell into disuse because the aliens, for some reason, weren't that impressed with it. Nobody landed on it. But then the interest was renewed in the 80s and into the 90s. And St. Paul Council, thought, to reinvent the town and reinvigorate everything. Let's do something with this pad. Let's upgrade it. Maybe let's get some, UFO experts to come and give a talk. So they actually held a UFO conference.
Okay.
Out there. It was me and Stanton Friedman and Fern Belzel, who was a cattle mutilation researcher, and then a few other people who gave presentations at the conference center just right next door. QFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, John Timmerman, a little bit later, John Timmerman, who worked for QFOS, he would go across North America with a traveling exhibit of UFOs and set them up in shopping malls and so forth and places like that. CUFOS agreed eventually to set up their traveling exhibit permanently in St. Paul, and created St. Paul created this little museum right next door to the UFO landing pad, and it sort of was recommemorated a few times. Mother Teresa herself visited the UFO landing pad.
Isn't that something?
And while she was there, she actually said something to the effect of, if there are sick people in space, we would go out and help them too. So it's had a lot of little bits of attention. I think they held the conference a couple of years in a row, and still to this day, nothing has ever landed there, unfortunately.
No, but it is an
interesting. Got involved.
Story.
The whole town got involved to the point where you could go to the pizza joint, and of course they had flying saucer pizzas that were out of this world.
Naturally.
But it's like, even like the hardware store, big sign, fix your spare parts for your flying saucers sold here. Even the bank, that there was all sorts of posters and murals, because it was our own version of Roswell, or mini Roswell, up in north part of Alberta. And the problem with St. Paul is that it's far away. It's hours away from even Edmonton, and so it's a little hard to get to. I would think that it was a little easier to get to. It would easily be as popular as Roswell, if not perhaps a little bit more. But it still exists, and it's one of my top UFO destinations in Canada, in a list that I posted on my blog.
Yeah, I was impressed with the design of it. I'll give you a few figures, because I was doing a bit of research on, when and how it was built and what it cost. At the time, again, in 1967, when they built it, it was $11,000 is what it cost them to build it. Considering inflation, that is just under $100,000 today, which for a small town, that's a considerable investment. But
absolutely,
but again, as you said, it's a Centennial Day event is what they did this for, which is Centennial Day is like the 50th anniversary of Canada, or 100th
Centennial, 1867, 100 years.
100-year anniversary. I'm an idiot. I apologize. But that was it's just an odd thing for them to choose to do to commemorate Canada's 100th birthday. They choose to spend today's money, $100,000 to build a landing pad. It weighs 130 tons of concrete. And the way they built it, like if you look at it now, it kind of looks like, almost like if you took a band shell, if you know what that is. We have a band shell. We're in the town I'm from. It's almost like a band shell, but underneath the circular platform, there's one kind of pillar made of concrete that is holding the whole thing up, and it's 2.5 meters high. So it's a pretty good height. I don't know what that would be in feet, but it's a bit off the ground. But the way they built it was, what I had read and saw photos illustrating this is they kept kind of a mound of dirt and poured the concrete on top of it with the pillar kind of down into the dirt. And once the concrete set, they removed all the dirt.
They removed the dirt. Oh, cool.
That's kind of a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Some other interesting points. It was designed by the town's mayor. The town's mayor's wife, who was kind of like a folk artist. She did a lot of, if she was here on the East Coast, it'd be paintings of lighthouses and lobsters. She did like the Alberta version of that. And when it was pitched to the mayor that we would do for the Centennial, we're going to build a UFO landing pad. She's like, I'll design it. She sketched it out, and that's what they came up with. But as far as a message, like when you build something like a UFO landing pad to commemorate Canada's 100th birthday, it just seems like, how is that appropriate? Like I can understand the town maybe being like, this could be a tourist kind of thing, but I wonder what this would mean in the context of commemorating the 100th birthday of Canada.
Well, I actually spent some time talking with some of the townspeople when I was there, and it was more along the lines of Canada is very welcoming. We're forging ahead, and at that time, In 1967, of course, we had just launched Alouette. I think Alouette was in 1966, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bit of a space race at the time, and the idea was that Canada was going to do its part to assist in the exploration and contact with whatever is out there. So it kind of made sense in their own kind of way,
Yeah, and kind of the like the openness, acceptance. I can see that kind of having the symbolism within that could kind of fit in with Canada, which is cool. And Canada, of course, is made of people coming from away, generally coming here. So a UFO landing pad, I guess, could fit into the broader, theme of that.
St. Paul is Centennial Town, Canada in all but name. Anyone without a project here isn't in, and the farther out the project is, the better. The town fathers set the pace by building a landing pad for unidentified flying objects. It turned out to be such a big tourist attraction that space sounds were piped in to add realism. So far, the only low-flying UFOs to be lured down are the paper variety, popular with the kids. But the local citizens are sure that even the Martians won't be able to resist their Western hospitality for long. To make the expected celestial visitors feel at home, flying saucers have started to sprout in backyards. One businessman donated a bus called the Martian Express to take care of earthly transportation problems. Until the little green men arrive, it'll be used by senior citizens and local sports groups. Since the landing pad first put St. Paul on the map, everybody's got the centennial bug. 6,000 centennial toques have been made by a group of housewives and shipped all over the world. Local food merchants have prepared menus that include such out-of-this-world delicacies as Saturn salads. St. Paul is trying to represent Canada's centennial spirit in microcosm. That bell rings out for brotherhood on Earth and someday even for outer space, says Mayor Jules Van Brabant, and brotherhood is what we think the centennial is all about.
Something that always bothers me is I feel like I missed the heyday of UFOs. All of the great kind of UFO flying saucer stories, it's always right around like the late 60s and into the 70s. There was just some kind of magic about that time and that era. When I think of 67, that was when Shag Harbor happened. Falcon Lake was 67.
Yeah.
They built the UFO landing pad in 67. There's, a space race. So the idea of like landing on the moon and exploring space is just like a current event thing that's being discussed. When you look back, do you see that? And like in all the stories you look at, do you see this as like the golden age, like the late 60s?
Yeah, it's no question. A lot of stuff was happening about that same time. Wasn't Man in His World in Montreal in 1967 as well, the big exhibition, and I think they had a mock-up of the Roswell alien, the dummy, in one of the exhibits in Montreal. So, yeah, you're right. Everything seemed to be happening in 67, in the 60s. Of course, this was in the middle of the Cold War, and people were, worried about the Russians, and if it wasn't the Russians, then who knows what it was. But this is just the middle of Apollo. 67 would have been Apollo. Let's see, I guess early 67 was probably the Apollo 1 tragedy, where 3 astronauts lost their lives on the launch pad, and then so Apollo 2. So I would say this was just in the middle of the space race, where we're going to land a man on the moon, according to John F. Kennedy. But it's true. After that, we got into all sorts of other diverse things. This was just after, I guess, Betty and Barney Hill's abduction story came out. And, since then into the 70s, we got into more technological stuff and more landing, although the close encounters of the second kind, the landing trace cases, they were really gone by the mid 1970s. And ever since then, ufology has been in transition, not floundering necessarily, but it certainly has been going through some different phases. And here we are more than 50 years later. And I think people are like, I agree with you. It's like, we're trying to reclaim the glory days of ufology.
And like the idea of like with the internet, it gives the ability of so many people to get together and discuss it, and the conversation's never ending. But I find it doesn't have the magic of kind of the stuff that happened before. You described earlier. You mentioned a guy who was going, from city to city, setting up like this traveling UFO museum at a mall. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like, that would be amazing to just stumble upon something like that would be so special. Where I find a lot of what happens now, it's just hard to find magic in. There's this crazy video on YouTube you guys gotta see.
Yeah.
Like it's like that's not the same as mall and small town dude with a bunch of photocopied fake government documents or maybe real. But anyway, it's the UFO landing pad. I think is a cool Canadian UFO story that a lot of people don't know. And as it often happens when there's something kind of unique about a town and the town embraces it in a unique way, like you described, the UFO pizza and all that stuff. This town, St. Paul, certainly has embraced it. So I want to ask you, is this an area that you've noticed any significant amount of UFO reports from? Like, has the topic of UFOs been accepted to the point that people are actually reporting it more than other places? From this area.
You mean in the area around St. Paul?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you would compare St. Paul or among other towns of similar size, or would it stand out in any way as far as UFO reports, or even comparing Alberta to other provinces in that?
Sure.
Regard?
Well, as a matter of fact, for a while it was because as a genius part of the reinventing of the St. Paul landing pad, when they were having the conferences, they actually installed a UFO hotline for anyone to report UFOs, and it went directly to the municipal office.
Yeah, this was something done by the town's like Chamber of Commerce, set up a 1-800 UFO hotline where they would take UFO reports.
Absolutely. And so we were in fact getting UFO reports, more than we should have for that period. I don't think it's still active, but I think you can actually go to the museum and file a report. I think you can. They actually had a sort of a binder of all the UFO reports that had been reported there. And so, in terms of the numbers of UFOs reported over Alberta, I would have to say that Alberta does seem to have its more than fair share. Part of that is because of Cold Lake. And the fact that there's military bases there where they're doing some testing of some, aircraft and so forth. There's a rumor that the cruise missile was tested in Cold Lake, that type of thing. So, there are some interesting cases that have occurred in Alberta, probably a little bit more than should be statistically with the population. Not sure why, but again, it could be a number of things that could have contributed to this.
To wrap this up, I have 2 UFO reports that came in, and whenever I talk to you, I like to bounce current cases off you, because you always have such a logical way to describe what these people are seeing. Let me play. I'm going to start with a voice memo. This was a recording a listener of the show sent me. Sadly, they didn't give their location, but this is a Canadian report, so somewhere in Canada. I guess at the end, what we'll do is maybe we can try to guess based on their accent what part of the country they're from. So here we go. This is William.
June 9th, almost 4 p.m., 15:55 p.m. My son and I were sitting in our apartment looking southwest, and we seen a big object in the sky. Turned out it was the Goodyear blimp, which is very unusual. It was flying very low, but very unusual. There's no reason for a blimp to be around here. As I began to film with my iPhone, and as I began to film, we seen a bright light, a bright object, very smaller than the blimp, but big enough to be noticeable, fly down from the clouds above, kind of circle the blimp, move around sporadically, flying around it, and then kind of zapped out of the screen, like out of the shot, and just disappeared back into the clouds. In the video, you have to zoom the video in to get a close up of the blimp while you're watching it, and then move it manually to see it all good. But there's a tree in the foreground, and it's a good example or good way to judge the size and the speed of this thing, because it stays between the blimp and the tree in the foreground as it does its thing. It was really weird. I'm not saying it was a UFO. I'm just saying I've never seen anything like this before. Even with the stills that I managed to take off the video, it was something very strange. So I don't know what it is, but I've never seen anything like it.
Let's start with accent. I'm going with East Coast of Canada. Where do you think this guy's from?
Yeah, it could be somewhere in Ontario too, but yeah, that's a good guess as far as the accent goes.
I went with the accent was pretty neutral, but he did say like I seen, and that is something people on the East Coast often will, instead of like I had seen or I have seen, they'll say I seen. So I'm going with East Coast. But as far as his report, the way I understand that is on June 9th, he looks out his window and he sees either a blimp or specifically the Goodyear blimp. It surprises him that it's there, so he films it. And I couldn't tell if it was him seeing this other object with his eye or him seeing this other object when he looks at the video that he filmed. I don't know what you got out of that, but ultimately he's saying there appears to be a blimp with another object kind of hovering around it and eventually going out of frame. Is that how you understood that?
Yeah. And I agree. I don't know whether he saw it visually or it was just on the video. Oddly enough, I think the Goodyear blimp was over Canada in early June, probably associated with the Grand Prix in Montreal. So I know again, and it probably would have flown from somewhere in the States to get here. So that might make some sense.
Yeah, and as far as what he saw, whether or not he's seeing it with his eye or just on the film makes a big difference. Because what I was thinking is, as he's describing it, if he's seeing this in his video, it could very easily be a lens flare with like light bouncing off of the surface of the Goodyear blimp or something of that nature. But I guess with something like this, without seeing the video and asking additional questions, it's pretty hard to make any kind of judgment on it.
Yeah, and that's a problem because we get that with photos too. I mean, people post on UFOs Above Canada, the Facebook group. I saw this amazing thing, last night, and it was completely unlike anything I've ever seen, and they don't give any details.
Yeah, but it's something where it's well, I shouldn't say it's hard to describe. It's hard to describe it clearly, but you can at least describe it vaguely.
Yeah.
In some way. I just did a search for Goodyear blimp Canada schedule, and it does appear that the Goodyear blimp was in Canada during that period of time. So him seeing the blimp, I guess, isn't the question, though. It's what this other object was.
But it could narrow down where it happened, though. If we get the track,
Yeah, that's a good point. I got one more. This next one isn't a voice. It was a text that was sent, a text report, and this was sent through the UFOs Above Canada group as well on Facebook. So this is from Daniel. The date of the sighting was the 19th of June, so 4 days ago. The location is in Quebec at a place called Chemin Rapid Sept. I don't know what that means. CHEMIN, new word, RAPID -Sept. I've never heard of this place, but what he sees at 2:27 a.m. An oval opening resembling an expanding cloud formation with an object that was bright white heading towards the east that emerged from the opening. The light had a diamond-shaped mist behind it that didn't dissipate, and another orangish orb that intercepted it from the south and seemed to follow this glow. The orange object corrected its course and headed northeast along with the white orb that had the diamond mist behind it. There also was a white streak that was coming from beyond the horizon to where the objects were heading. After losing sight of the lights for about a minute, I told my uncle and girlfriend what I was seeing. I proceeded to observe once more as the whitish glow of the mist was fading and the orange orb branched off towards the eastern horizon and headed south, and that was the end of the sighting. So I just want to say, first of all, you just talked about people not giving enough information in their sighting. This person gives a lot of information, but I'm still like, what the heck?
Yeah.
It's so hard to describe because if you see something in the sky and it's it's a light that's that's mingling in and amongst the clouds, it's very hard to describe it in writing in a way that somebody in their mind can picture it. When I hear his sighting, I have a very hard time understanding what he's seen. I'm picturing him describing something between a sunset and just the kind of natural flow of clouds happening at the same time.
Yeah, and that's typical of what witnesses are struggling with. They're having trouble putting into words something that is beyond their purview, that they have never seen before, and then trying to explain to somebody else what they've seen. And you really are literally at a loss for words. And that makes it really, really difficult because we all have different interpretations. That people will say something was an orb, for example. Well, what does that mean? It was round. But some might mean that to interpret as a sphere. Some are like circular, and a disc, for example, seen flipped on its side looks like it's something round too, but it's actually a saucer shape. So the shape itself is not necessarily a great indicator of what actually was seen, and that's one of the big problems.
Yeah, and it's if you don't have a background in, I don't know, meteorology, be like, what is the study of kind of like the things in the lower atmosphere, like, clouds and stuff that would naturally be seen in the sky. If you don't know the language of, that science, it's very hard as a layman to describe, what you're seeing there. I think as I'm reading this report, you're kind of noticing the effects of that, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one to throw at you. Posted to UFOs Above Canada, Saturday night, which would have been June 18th, 19th, something like that. Around 1 a.m., seen what looked like a large white cloud in the night sky. Initially thought the moon was lighting it up, but it soon broke apart, leaving a large cloud different from all the others, and there was a moving light that went off with the other portion of the cloud.
It seems like there's two things going on there. One is they're noticing a lit up cloud kind of, I don't know if dissipates the word, but just the way a cloud will naturally kind of flow and break into pieces or whatnot. They're noticing a lit up, a cloud that for some reason was illuminated that's doing that. And then separately, in and amongst that, they're seeing some kind of bright light. But
right.
My first thought is like a bright light in the sky, like maybe airplane or helicopter or something. But neither of those would emit the kind of light that would brighten up a cloud, I wouldn't expect.
Yeah, and describing, we were just talking about meteorology. Some large cloud that seemed to break apart and then left another cloud. Lenticular clouds are well known, and they're clouds that are lit up even though they're high up in the atmosphere because the sun is shining on them that we don't realize because it's dark out. It's possible that might have been effect, but the fact that it looked like a cloud is an attempt to describe something that was a long, discrete object of some sort.
Mm-hmm. But I guess let's say if you took this report and for whatever reason you're like, I'm going to study the hell out of this and try to figure out what happened. I suppose the next step would be an interview with the witness where you ask a whole bunch of clarifying questions as far as, what direction they were looking, exactly what time of day, figure out what the weather is. Like, what would you do if you wanted to completely understand what they've seen? What would your next steps be?
Well, it would be good to go out to where this happened. If have the witness go with you to where this occurred and point out, oh yeah, I saw it right above that tree and it moved over to there. And then we'd have to go, look through some meteorological records, some star charts, maybe go through FlightAware. There's a lot of steps that would be involved with every single case. And, people may not realize the amount of effort that it actually takes to investigate even just one case that seems simple. And yet, in order to get enough information to decide anything, may take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. And it seems less and less frequently there are people there are less and less people who seem interested in investigating these individual cases. Even in my experience, like when I first really got into it, which would have been 2015, 2014, like kind of in that era, there were still a lot of civilian investigators and with MUFON or whoever else, even here in Canada, that would be interested in possibly investigating or researching like a one-off sighting like this. But I don't even recall the last time I heard of kind of a civilian investigation into like a civilian reported sighting.
Yeah, and that's one of the big problems when we do the Canadian UFO survey, when we gather information on cases from various groups and whatnot. Most are poorly investigated, if investigated at all. Mm-hmm. Back in the 60s and 70s, during the heyday, there were dozens of UFO groups, and they had many dozens and dozens of members. And people, even if they weren't trained very well mm-hmm. in investigating, at least they would go out and talk to the witness and get some information that might tape record them or something like that. And now it's so much easier just to browse the web and find some interesting videos that people may have posted on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever, and just go from there. It's a lot less work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest problem, that like anything, ufology can be a lot of work. It's the, police work, for example, the non-glamorous part of police work. There's not a lot of bang, bang, shoot 'em ups anymore, but there sure is a lot of paperwork, a lot of interviewing, a lot of talking with witnesses, a lot of measuring and so forth. Mm-hmm. But most people don't think of that when they think about ufology. It's all the gee whiz stuff, the great videos and government investigations and cover-ups and so forth. But the fundamental basis, the foundation of all ufology are the UFO reports. And if no one's investigating, we're not getting good data like that, that's a problem.
I want to thank you for joining Chris Rutkowski and I for a discussion. But before we part, I'm going to give some thanks. First, a big thanks to Chris for sharing an evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A big thanks to Monty Datta for contributing the music for this episode. But the most important thanks, as always, goes out to everyone listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping this show alive is, and it has always been, an uphill battle. So if you want to help take a bit of weight off the show's back, make sure you're listening on the premium feed. And not only does the premium feed keep the show alive, it'll give you more of each topic than you'll find here on the free feed, as I'm adding exclusive content regularly, and I maintain a full collection of back episodes only on the premium feed. So for about the price of a cup of coffee, go premium at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And on the topic of the premium feed, let me thank the newest subscribers, Rin, Duke, and Werewolf Kennels. Thank you for your generous support. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show but can't do it with a premium feed subscription, you can give me a big hand by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting like-minded UFO heads know what we're doing here. If you have any story ideas, if you want to give feedback on the show, or if you'd like to share your UFO experience, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I hope to hear from you. But until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.